You ever seen a species that considered interstellar war just another Tuesday? Asked Sergeant Kesh, staring at the hollow screen in front of him. The other officers in the war room didn't respond. Immediately, they were too busy watching the carnage unfold. The Galactic Union had been at war with humanity for 6 months. It was supposed to be a simple operation, wipe out a fledgling species before it could become a problem. There where reports had been clear humans were primitive, their technology was outdated, their biology unimpressive, and their numbers insignificant, and yet the war had been an absolute disaster there. Supposed to be new to the galactic stage, General Vorak grumbled. Their ships were cobbled together from salvage tech, their weapons outdated by 3 centuries, but look at this. He gestured toward the footage of fleet of human ships, battered, scarred, and jury-ridged with pieces from a dozen different species, was tearing through the latest Union battle group. They didn't fight like the disciplined, coordinated forces of the Galactic Union. They fought like lunatics. The humans weren't retreating when their shields dropped. They weren't ejecting when their ships were about to explode. They simply kept fighting until either their enemies were dead or they were one of the Union officers. A ALF strategist with centuries of experience shifted uncomfortably. Sir, the latest reports from the battlefield say the humans are adapting. Vork's 6 eyes narrowed. Adapting how they're using our weapons, our ships, our tactics. The room fell silent. That's impossible, KS said. It takes decades to train soldiers to pilot our ships. It takes years to understand our weapon systems. Apparently, the officer muttered. It takes humans about an afternoon. Vorks slammed a fist against the table. This is ridiculous. They can't to steal our ships and start using them better than us. They do, and they do it fast. A nervous murmur spread through the room. The humans weren't just winning. They were learning. Every battle they survived made them stronger. The weapons they salvaged, they improved. The strategies that worked against them, they adapted to every attempt to crush them. Only gave them more tools to work with. Kesh exhaled sharply. We underestimate aided them. We didn't just underestimate them, Borak muttered, watching as a single damaged human ship detonated itself inside the core of a Union battleship. We didn't understand them at all. Captain Reynolds wiped the sweat off his forehead and leaned back in his seat. How many of those crab-looking guys are left? The ensign next to him checked the readings. Looks like they're down to 2 battleships and a handful of cruisers. That all? Reynolds grinned. All right, boys. Let's wrap this up. I promise the crew we'd hit the bar after this one. Commander Hayes, sitting across from him, raised an eyebrow. You realize we're still in the middle of a war, right? Reynolds shrugged. Yeah, but they don't. The Enan frowned. Sir, you mean the enemy? No, Reynolds said, gesturing to the fleet outside. I mean us, the guys back home. They're barely paying attention. I sent a message to Earth this morning telling them we wiped out another fleet. You know what response I got? Hayes shook his head. Cool, keep up the good work. Let us know when it's over. That was at Hayes' side. They do realize we're fighting an entire galactic empire, right? Yeah, Reynolds chuckled. They just don't care back on Earth. This war is just another thing happening in the background. It's not even in the top 3 trending news stories. Some guy invented a new way to deep fry steak, and that's got more views than this war. Hayes ran a hand down his face. I don't know if that's terrifying or impressive. It's both, Reynolds said. Now let's finish these guys off so we can go home and find out what deep fried steak tastes like. Admiral Threx sat alone in his chamber, staring at the war map. The red lines of human advancement stretched farther than they should. They had lost entire sectors and days, regions that had been Union territory for centuries. They aren't stopping, he muttered to himself. He had studied wars his entire life. Every species had a breaking point. Every species had limits. The Union had never encountered a species that fought like this. Like war was just another part of life. No different from farming or trade. Humans weren't the strongest species. They weren't the smartest. They weren't the most technologically advanced, but they were something far worse. They were normalizing the war. The other species of the Galactic Union had contingencies for where they made treaties, stockpiled weapons, planned for generations. War was a devastating event that disrupted everything for humans. War wasn't an exception. It was just Something that happens sometimes, and that was the scariest part, because if war was normal for humans, what happened when they got good at it? Admiral Threx clenched his jaw as another transmission came in. The faces of his top generals appeared on the hollow screen there, expressions ranging from concern to outright panicked. Admiral, one of them, a reptilian VNAC named Zerlin, began his voice tight. We lost the Bari sector. THX's claws tapped rhythmically on the table. Bari's was one of our most fortified strongholds. What happened? A silence fell over the room before another general, a hulking ID-like officer, rumbled, they didn't just take it, they moved in. Threx narrowed his eyes. Explain, they didn't bomb the cities, they didn't destroy infrastructure, they just walked in and took over like they were claiming an abandoned station. Civilians surrendered, expecting the usual treatment, occupation curfews, rationing, but the humans, the officer hesitated as if the words themselves defied reason. They fixed things. THX's mandibles twitched in confusion. They what Sheeran's voice came out barely above a whisper. They repaired power grids, they restored water systems, they got the factories running again under their management, of course. Then they put up signs saying now under new management, human resources available. We have reports that within days productivity increased. THX's stomach twisted. You're telling me they conquered an entire sector and turned it into a functioning colony overnight? Not just functioning, another general muttered. Thriving. For the first time in his career, Threx felt something close to fear. He had expected brutality, massacres, the usual horrors of war, but humans didn't just fight differently, they thought differently. They didn't burn what they conquered, they absorbed it. And the worst part, the civilians liked it. People are cooperating. Zyron continued, not out of fear, not because they're forced to. They're happy. Human soldiers share rations, they joke with locals, they don't act like invaders, they act like he search for the word contractors, like they're just here to get a job done. Threx inhaled sharply. He needed to reassert control before the conversation spiraled further enough. This is a war we are not losing to a species that treats military conquest like a corporate acquisition. But no one looked convinced. Another general, a grizzled veteran of 1,000 battles, folded his arms. Sir, if I may speak freely, you may not. Threx snapped. The room fell silent. He couldn't afford doubt to spread, not now. On the bridge of the Havoc, Captain Reynolds spun his chair lazily, balancing a protein bar between his fingers. So let me get this straight, he said between bites. They still don't get what's happening. Commander Hayes checked the latest intelligence reports. Nope, they keep waiting for us to collapse. They think we'll get exhausted or run out of resources. Reynolds snorted. They really don't understand us, huh? Hayes set his data pad down. To be fair, most species collapse after prolonged war. Their economies break, their people lose morale, their supply chains crumble, right? Reynolds said, leaning forward. But see, we're used to things falling apart. Every country on Earth has had some kind of total disaster in its history. Depressions, wars, plagues. We don't break, we just get really annoyed and start finding solutions. Hayes chuckled. We don't stop until there's nothing left to fix. Exactly, Reynolds said, and right now the Galactic Union is the biggest broken thing we've ever seen. And if there's one thing humans can't resist, he let the sentence hang. Hayes smirked. A Project Admiral Threx was struggling to contain the chaos in his ranks. Reports of more lost sectors were pouring in, not because of overwhelming military force, but because planets were defecting. The inhabitants weren't resisting human occupation, they were inviting it. It was unheard of. The Union had ruled with an iron grip for centuries. No species had ever wanted to be conquered before, and yet here they were, watching system after system voluntarily switched sides. Threx gritted his teeth and pulled up the latest intercepted transmission. A human officer was speaking to the planetary governor of Vexo Prime. Look, buddy, the human said, leaning back in his chair, feet kicked up. I get it, you've been under Union rule 4 generations. They taxed you to death, made you follow 100 stupid laws, and treated you like second-class citizens. But we've got a better deal. You sign on with us, and in return you get working infrastructure, better trade, and get this, as saying how things are run. The governor was silent. The human grinned. We'll even throw in pizza. Threx froze. What's pizza? The governor asked. Cautiously, oh my friend, the human said, with the tone of a salesman about to close the deal of a lifetime. You have no idea what you've been missing. Threx slammed the console, ending the transmission. They weren't just fighting a military force, they were fighting an idea, and the worst part, they were losing. THX's claws tapped against the cold surface of the war table. Every new report felt like an insult, an open wound, bleeding out the pride of the Galactic Union. The humans weren't just winning battles, they were dismantling the very foundations of Union rule, and the worst part, they weren't even trying very hard. They've taken Tarsus 9. General Sherlin muttered, his tail coiling in agitation. That was one of our strongest strongholds. Defenses were impenetrable. Threx inhaled deeply, barely containing his frustration. And how exactly did the humans breach it? Another suicide fleet, orbital bombardment, and infiltration unit. Silence. Finally, a younger officer coughed and glanced at his data pad. They walked in. Threx Fro explained the battles. The Union had been defeated, and the humans never even considered it a war. Threx sank into his chair, numb. What happens now? Reynolds leaned forward, smiling. Now we do what humans do best. Threx swallowed hard, which is, Reynolds chuckled, we build